In this video, I'm going to present a very culturally based motive, which is very powerful in Western samples, and this notion of self-enhancement. That here is what is this? The Rosenberg self-esteem scale. And so they ask these questions here, on a scale of 1 to 4, how much do you agree with? I'm a person of worth, etc. And what happens is American self-esteem has been skyrocketing. That is, American self-esteem is quite high, and it's actually some believe this is comes from the Protestant view. That is to say, many Protestant branches of religion they have this notion of predestination, and the idea is um, the day you're born, it's already determined whether you will or will not go to heaven. It's predestined. And what happens is your job is to search the world around you to determine whether or not you are one of the chosen few. And if you are one of the chosen few, then God will bless you with riches. And so the idea is from a Western perspective that this tendency to view ourselves quite highly and strongly, which is seen in many, many, many contexts, is a function of the Protestant predestination. In fact, here is the average Rosenberg self-esteem score across the last, well, not the last, this is an old graph, but, across the 30-year span, and you can see that the average self-esteem score has risen quite dramatically across those 3 decades. Okay, so we find that this notion of self-enhancement, and self-enhancement comes in so many ways. If you ask a group of 100 people, are you in the top 50% of safe drivers? It's like 99% will say, yes, I'm in the top half. And it's like, no, you're not. It's pretty obvious to me. And so, from a Western perspective, it almost feels like this self-enhancement or this over-exaggerated beliefs in our capacities is a healthy way to view the world. It's the way that it's the outcome of socially healthy development or something. But what you find is that this self-enhancing doesn't seem to appear in East Asian samples, and yet at the same time, it's not like they have mental health problems around the world or across the board. So if self-enhancement is supposed to be an important function in good mental health, why don't we see it anywhere else? So a meta-analysis was done to actually confirm how big of a difference this was. And a meta-analysis is a research design where you take, let's say, this notion of self-enhancement. And so you could have different research studies that were studying self-enhancement, but they might approach self-enhancement in different ways. They might talk about, again, how attractive are you? Oh, I'm very attractive. And a different study might be, are you a good driver? Oh, I'm a great driver. Something. I don't know. So it's different ways to study self-enhancement, but ultimately it's all self-enhancement. So they found 131 studies. They had 31 different methods that were used, 33,000 participants, and now you want to find the story that emerges from all of them. Huh? And so at the top there, you can see the y-axis is effect size, or how strong the self-enhancement was. And you can see the American, or Western samples rather, have a relatively high D. D is effect size, has a high effect size. There is a strong evidence of self-enhancement. All right, now if you look at the bottom graph, you can see what happens is the average across all of these studies, the average effect size, or now how much self-enhancement, was negative 0.02, which is almost implying that the East Asian samples on average are actually reporting that they are worse than they actually are. Okay, so not just enhancing themselves, but deprecating or something. Okay? So we find this huge self-enhancement bias in Western samples, but instead in East Asian samples, they're going to present a group enhancing bias. So is your group better than average? And they're all going to say, yes, my group is better than average. So it's really an interesting concept that they're willing to run out there and be self-critical, but at the same time turn around and say the group that I am a member of is in fact better than the average. So we find that East Asian samples tend to have much more modesty norms, and so it's an interesting way because from a Western perspective, if And I heard this one time with some Korean graduate students. They were Korean graduate students up at the University of North Texas, and they were working on a PhDs in music, and they were complaining at this dinner party I was at. Oh, my advisor is racist and doesn't like us, and I had some conversations. And it turns out this is the way the advisor always starts meetings, is he says, okay, I have this project that needs to be done. Who can do it? And what happens is these Korean graduate students were saying things like, well, I don't know, maybe. Whereas the American graduates were like, yes, I can do it. And of course, the advisor in a Western perspective is going to grab the dude that says, yes, I can do it. Yet, from an Asian context, if you were to jump out and promote yourself like that, we'll talk about this notion of sticking out and fitting in a later next one of the next videos. And clearly, if you jump out there and raise your hand and scream, I can do it, you are making yourself stick out. You're not blending in. And so it's just this notion of self-enhancement just runs counter to the other ways that their culture has taught them to behave. Well, we find that it's not just society, but it's cultural or family, parental level. American mothers consider that this notion of self-enhancement is important. You should tell your children they're special on a daily basis. Taiwanese parents think that high self-esteem is actually a bad thing for a child that goes out into society. And that's because success in an American cultural context does involve individualistic thinking and individualistic enhancement, but the opposite is true in a collectivistic cultural context. So we find the basic premise of individualism is you are a unique individual. And what happens is that you will have to rely on yourself. And if you have low self esteem, you don't have other resources to help you. You must be independent, therefore, you must be strong. Whereas the collectivistic cultural belief system would be the exact opposite. So if you have a lower self-esteem or lower levels of self-enhancement, you've got other group members that can bring you up. Okay?